Thank you so much, Ravi, for agreeing to do this or offering to do this video. Really appreciate it, and I know that a lot of people find this really helpful listening to your recovery story. So, how would you like to start? What would you particularly like to tell people?
Well, it's a pleasure, Georgie, to speak to you, and really the work that you're doing, and also some of the stories that I'll tell, some of the background that I'll tell has changed my life. So from the age of 13 right to, I estimate, 35, I had niggling on and off back issues. It moved around, wasn't always in the same place. And over the years, I just, managed. I saw chiropractors, osteopaths, acupuncturists, Chinese massage therapists. I think that's most of it,
What sort of things were you told was wrong with your back or the cause of your pain?
A good question. One of the osteopaths, and I think the chiropractor said the same thing, and then since then everybody pretty much agreed with this, was that they said my left hamstring was tighter than my right, and that this is going to continuously cause me problems. But is that a symptom or a cause? They suggested it was a cause. And if I stretch out my left hamstring, then generally I'll be okay. And guess what? If I sometimes had back pain, and if I did a hamstring stretch to my left leg, it often alleviated it. It often resolved it until the next time round. But what I never seemed to be able to do was really manage it fully. It was always niggling. It was always there. And I didn't understand. Sometimes I got out of bed a certain way and I was in agony, or one story I told you about was, this was 2007. It was a very cold February day, and I was on my way to work, driving in a car, and I sneezed. I had a niggly sort of, something was coming on, like a flu or something. Anyway, it was freezing cold. I was driving. I sneezed, and I had some sort of a reaction that I can't really explain. I don't understand the medical terms, but I put my back out. And what happened was that some muscle to the side of my spine to the left seized up. It just squeezed really tight. The pain is nothing I've ever felt before. The way I reacted is the closest I can describe it is what I've experienced with women going into labor, screaming, the baby, that sort of level of screaming. I was screaming in the car, and I've never screamed before like this. And I had to call an ambulance. My first reaction was to step out of the car and try and walk it off or something, but that didn't work. I got back in the car. I didn't know what to do. My car was parked in the middle of the road, and I called an ambulance, and they came along. They pushed my car out of the way. They said they couldn't drive it, but it was a hazard. They pushed the car out of the way, took me to the hospital. I was screaming all the way in this ambulance, and for 4 hours I was screaming in the ward. I couldn't walk for 2 weeks after this point, and the memory of that doesn't leave me. And I think that was a crucial point for me that made me think: is all of this osteopaths, chiropractors, acupuncturists, is any of that working? Anyway, a few years passed, and I can't remember why, but I just decided to look it up online, heal your back pain, or started searching for these terms. And I came across a book by John Isano, Healing Your Back Pain. And I first looked at it and thought, this isn't congruent to anything I've learned so far. It's all about brain and mind. And, I thought, well, what's the worst that can happen? I've got some free time on my hands. Why don't I look at this? And he went into some details that described me down to a T. Eventually he talked about TMS. I forget what TMS stands for, but he described all of the, if you like, the checklist of, have you got TMS? And I couldn't help but respond, yeah, that. And this was the first time I'd ever had this realization of this thing, TMS, existing. I realized, I think, that if there was an extreme example of TMS, then I probably am in that quartile or quantile. And funny enough, up until that point, I used to meditate, and I'm familiar with self-hypnosis, but I just never made a connection between my experiences with self-hypnosis and what was going on with what Isano was talking about. So I went into a hypnosis trance. I did it. But the difference this time was I tried an experiment, which is I had a conversation with my body, something I never thought about doing before, but it just felt right. And I had done this. This, by the way, this was during an episode. This was I was in a lot of pain. I went into a trance, and usually when I have these episodes, I'm in pain for weeks. But I was better, significantly better, about a day later. And that made me realize that this is something. This, and I didn't understand it so well, but I knew it was something. Now, I wasn't 100% fixed, but I've noticed my recovery was the best that it ever been, better than any osteopath, any chiropractor, and so on, which I usually did recover from, but this was the fastest recovery. I was still in pain, and I still had issues, but they were niggly, and they were no longer leaving me bedbound for days. They were just popping up every so often. And that's when I found you, Georgie, online, and I contemplated it for a few weeks, but then I just thought, let me go and speak to Georgie. Let's talk it through. And you suggested to me some things like writing letters to certain people. And although I didn't physically write the letter, what I did was I went through a process similar to that meditation that I described before about how my body feels about my work situation, my career aspirations, and so on. In the last 6 months, I've not needed to see, or I've chosen not to see, any acupuncturist, any chiropractor, any osteopath. And I'm 100% convinced that all of the challenges and issues I had around this healing process of my lower back were going on up here, not down in the lower part of my spine. And I'm getting better and better at managing this. And if I was to put a percentage next to it, I would estimate that I'm 95% there.
So what else have you done to you feel, either change in mindset or some strategies you've used to help you progress, do you think?
My wife explored a concept called hypnobirthing. Mm-hmm. And we attended a couple of days of workshops around using, let's say, the power of the mind to ease the birthing process. And you see, that plus my increasing foray into meditation and yoga, I become better and better as I learn more and more different techniques. When I went on this hypnobirthing 2-day workshop, of course, the primary audience was my wife in terms of her goal. I benefited from that. I benefited from the visualization and different ways, if you like. I mean, no one uses these terms, but in my mind, it's a way of my mind communicating with the rest of my body, making it feel relaxed, making it feel easy, making it recover from. I do some very high intensity exercises, and I'm sometimes thinking that my body doesn't recover from that process efficiently unless I also meditate and do some yoga. So it's this cycle of activity, and I think that if I don't stick with my regimes of daily meditation, then I can feel the effects of that very fast. I can start to feel niggles coming back. I can start to feel something happening, and so I take some time out. I get peace and quiet, which is funny enough something you take for granted once you realize you don't have it. Whereas in the past, I would have just no way would I have given any priority to that, and I feel that that's life changing, and there's no way I'm ever going to stop doing that again.
If I asked you what was the maybe one or two best bits of advice that you would give to people watching this, what would you suggest?
Is don't underestimate the power of your mind in the process. I did. And even that's me, someone who's been into hypnosis and even things like NLP and so on for a long time. And even I underestimated the role of my mind in the pain in my body.
What do you think was the thing that you found hardest in this?
I think the thing I find hardest is that why didn't I clock onto this earlier? Almost a sense of regret. And I think that's, again, valuable advice that, I'm nearly 40 and I'd experienced backache for, let's round it off to about 20 years. What a shame. And I do look back on that and I think, why didn't anybody point this out to me? All the specialists that I've seen over the years, and why didn't a single person say, yeah, sure, there might be something physical, but there might be something up here as well. There's something going on in your brain and the role of meditation. So why didn't anyone just clue me onto that? And I know the answers. They're probably oblivious to it as well. Yeah. And so I wish I'd met someone like you, Georgie, about 20 years ago, who could have at least pushed me in the right direction. Oh, right.
10 years, just about, maybe. But yes, it's because people just aren't aware of it. And that's why we're working hard to hopefully change the mindset, raise awareness, and help people recognize the importance of taking the mind into account and what's going on in the brain. Yeah. So fascinating recovery story. And I think you've raised some really interesting points. So thank you so much, Ravi. And all the best with the new baby as well.
Thank you very much, Georgie, and speak to you again in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely.